everybody, welcome to Talk, Teach, Play, where we discuss everything youth and youth sports. My name is Aaron Locks. I'm the CEO and founder of the National Academy of Athletics, and with me today is the wonderful, noble lady, Kristen Ruprecht. You want to say hello?
Hi, everybody. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me again.
It's exciting to every time we get to have the conversation, because right now, particularly, there's a lot of angst, or a lot of issues, particularly with the whole thing around social and emotional side. So I'm really excited to have you guys share with us today. The topic is really going to discuss a little bit about how we parents, coaches, anybody that's in charge of kids, we put our expectations on the kids, and what's a good way to kind of work around that. So I think if you're okay, Kristen, let's just dig right in. What do you think?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you and I have talked about this before on some of our other conversations. By the way, if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe so you can catch and follow up with us. And we'll give you some additional information later. But Kristen, we've talked about this in terms of that the communication is important. It has to really be like a two-way street, right? It has to be something where it's not a dictator scenario, rather working together. So let me just turn the floor over, and why don't you take a run at it? Give me a little information on that, see where we go.
Yeah, I think, expectations are tricky. You hear a lot of times people will say, well, if you just don't have any expectations, then you'll never be disappointed, right? And, theoretically, I think that works, but I don't think it's realistic. And especially when it comes to parents and kids or coaches and athletes, there are some expectations, but I think it starts with communication. And so if you open up the lines of communication, which is what we always recommend first with Noble One, is, are you having dialogue with youth in any capacity? That's most important. But that's how you build respect, right? Through open lines of communication. And then that builds trust as well. So, if parents have an expectation, let's say that by the time they get home from work, their kids are going to have all their practice gear ready, so they don't have to be yelling and screaming at them to get it. Have they communicated about that? And that's kind of their thing. That's sort of the behavior that they do on a regular basis. So that way it's been talked about. Hey, just so you know, I'm going to be home at 4:30. We got to leave by 4:40. Let's make sure that all your practice stuff, does that sound good to you? So
it sounds like the first place to start with the communications is really about clarity, right? So if you're going to set expectations, if my expectation is I'm going to pick you up at 4:30, then these are the things that need to be done so that we can be successful doing it. I know with my kids, I did something which really helped me, because kids are so over-programmed and told what to do all the time. They kind of at the one point want to go like, hey, forget about it. You know what I mean? Where what else can we do to make that work? So what I found is interesting. We used to tell them and give them their list of things each day, but we'd also, like for their equipment, we'd take a picture of all the equipment bagged up and ready to go, and say, okay, all of this has to be ready to go. So when I come home, I see it all there. We throw it in the bag and we go. Because I know you were a soccer mom and a soccer coach, and I know nothing worse than showing up the game without a shin guard or something, right? You're like, you're kidding, right? It doesn't work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good point too. Like, what's the expectation then? I had this conversation the other day with a friend of mine, and she's got, they're in a divorce situation. They've got two kids who are really active in sports. And so, usually it's like halftime. You've got one kid at mom's, then they switch. So let's say the kid forgets his equipment at dad. So what's the expectation there? Is it that, I'll call dad, and of course he'll run it right over to me? Well, that's not, and I see it happen all the time.
We had to do that for a while. Yeah, that's right. You got to do it.
I've done it too. And it's like, but what if you had that conversation with your kid? Like, if you leave your stuff at the other parents, we've talked about it, that's your responsibility, and I'm not going to be able to run and rescue you. It's like and then that's like, we communicated about that. And then you have that conversation, when it comes up, remember, we talked about this.
Right. I think there's a really good value point to that as well, which is if with anybody, if there's parameters, boundaries, expectations that are set in advance, particularly if there's some level of agreement, right? Then it makes it easier to hold them accountable to that. Because I don't know about you, but if you wanted to hold me accountable for something, but you didn't tell me what I was accountable for, that's not going to work for me. And that's not really fair to kids either, right?
Yeah. And I think too, like kids don't like to be told what to do. I mean, nobody likes to be told what to do.
Right.
So I would always say, like, to parents and coaches, like, allow the kids to be inclusive in the conversation and in the decision making process. Like, you always question it back to them. Well, if they're like, no, no, they're pushing back. Well, what would you do? How would you solve this
There you
problem?
go.
Give them the input. So then it's like, there's that trust that's built and mutual respect.
I love that. So allowing kids to have their voice. Obviously, there's some things are non-negotiables. We know that, right? But
Yeah.
there are some things that you can. And I think by empowering kids, we kind of lift them up. It's funny. I normally save the questions to the end, but a question had come in that I thought was just spot on this. So, Aaron, you're always talking about being positive and treating kids with kid gloves. I don't know about that, but nonetheless, okay, kid gloves. But I want my kids to learn discipline and to get better, particularly in sports. So how can I stay positive but make it better for them? And I want them to improve. I want to push them. I want to be better player. That's from Andrea. She's a mom in Sacramento. What would you say to that? So, got any ideas about that?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of perception, right? Which I think is one of the things we wanted to touch on anyway.
Right.
So it's like if the perception of an expectation. So if the parent, and I've done this too, you're expecting your child, oh, I'm paying all this money for them to be in this sport and I'm driving them to practice, and why aren't they getting better? Or maybe it's a game that you're watching and
Right.
you see a play that maybe they didn't do that you knew they could do. And then it's like, then the parent gets all disappointed and butthurt and then comes down on the child, like, why did you do that? So it's like, that's their perception is the kid did something wrong. Maybe the kid doesn't even realize that they missed that opportunity within the
Right.
game.
Right.
No, I feel like that's kind of, again, it's just a discussion, which would be more around kind of goal setting with
Right.
your, like, we talked about this with some of the coaches in the, when we were doing our retreats, is
Right.
that
Yes.
the season, it really does take the parent, the coach, and the child and talk like, what's the baseline here? What do we want to accomplish this season? What do you want to learn individually? What do you want to contribute to the team? And that way, it's already talked about, and the parent brings something up, then they can kind of fall back on, hey, I noticed in the game, like you kind of, miss that pass or whatever. Is there something, we can work on to, get better at that?
Right.
And the
I
kids
think
know.
I think how a lot of it is. I mean, it's interesting that. I mean, she basically just said that I'm kid gloves kid, which again, whatever. Everybody's like you say, perception. I tend to look at it as I want buy-in, I want inclusion, I want them to be excited about it, so they'll want to continue to do it more, right? Because it doesn't matter if you love doing something, but then someone's kind of sucking the life out of it, then you're not going to want to do it, or at least around them. I've seen kids that the organized, structured stuff they're really good, but they get to the point where they don't want to do it. But then they go out and play with their buddies and they're doing the same thing. And you're like, well, what's the difference? Well, the parents are the difference, or the coaches are different, right? So you talked about perception there. So in this situation, um, you know, we discussed this a little bit, but the importance of the perceived value of kids' strengths or areas of challenge,
Yeah.
because they tend to be our perceptions of those things, right? And we put those on our kids, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's like what we do as parents is we always try to take away any challenges. We don't want our kids to fall on their face. We don't want them to mess up, so we just dictate. Do this and do that, and this is how I would do it. And we never let kids take charge, of their own lives. So that's where that empowerment comes in again, and that self-awareness, and then teaching kids to identify their own strengths and then areas where they want to improve. Let them be the judge of what they want to work on. And
Right.
that's not just in sports, that's in any area of life, like I really want to, get better at soccer is one thing, but I also want to really get better at, I want to learn how to play the guitar or whatever it is. Like, let them determine the opportunities that they want. And if they mess up or there's some kind of a challenge, that's an opportunity to turn it into a strength. And I think that's what we forget as parents and coaches is immediately we throw up our arms like, oh no, they
Right.
messed up. instead of being like, wow, I could really use this as a teaching opportunity.
And
That's a,
for some reason, there was a pivot at some point where we got to a place where we're afraid to let our kids fail. And failure doesn't have to become fatal, right? I mean, but realistically, that's how we all grew. We learned because we weren't amazing ballerinas or basketball players or musicians the first time we ever did it. You know, you get lucky, make a shot or something, but realistically, it takes practice. And to get good at anything, to practice, you got to love doing it. You have to have a drive, a desire, a passion. And I think you're right. You know, the challenge that I see a lot is that we see a level. I want my kid to be this good. I was that good. They should be this good. And we end up pulling them. You know, a coach mentioned the other day, one of the conversations, he said, I feel like I want it more than they do. And you know what I said to him? I said, you probably do, right?
yeah, of course. It's that like living vicariously through your kids or your athletes, like how you want them to perform, you know, what would you do to win? And it's really not about that. It's more about motivating them, like you just said, to want to be successful.
So
To want
how would you help somebody in that scenario if I'm one of those ones that I have that interest to bring them to the top, and I'm getting that disconnect. I mean, I love the idea you mentioned earlier about, you know, the expectations, because that's kind of the whole theme we're talking about. But is it expectations? Is it communication? Is it a combination of all of those?
I think you have to find out like what's their reward system,
Mm,
right? Because not everybody reacts to the same thing. Like think about in life, like jobs. Some people literally get jobs just to make money. That's all they need. If I make a lot of money, I could care less about anything else. Where other people are like, no, I need a job where I just connect to people. So it's like that. What's that? The love languages, like
right,
right?
right.
You need to be affirmed. Do you need to be validated? Do you need like action? What?
You
So
need
you
a hug. What is it? Yeah, right.
yeah,
Yeah.
same thing. You have to determine what it is that kids will respond to.
You
And
know, it reminds me of the story about John Lennon when he was a freshman in high school. I don't know if you heard this. And they went to the counselor's office and they did a little quiz, and it said, what do you want to be when you get older? And he said, happy. And they said, you don't understand the question. And he goes, no, you don't understand the answer. And it's, you know, again, right, that's that ship. I know you're probably going, yes, exactly, right, you know.
yes, yes, I know exactly what that is. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're getting back to expectations. I do believe that it is really tough. I know, especially, you know, my kids just are just coming through and out of high school, and the expectations are set to a certain level. You got a baseline minimum, right? I mean, you gotta bathe yourself, you gotta take care of your food, all these bare minimum. Those are expectations. But then there's that next level component that I think as parents, you know, you said a little bit earlier, which I'd love to hear a little more about, is what you want for your child, but then how do you match that up what they want for themselves, right? Because you want your child to have a wonderful job that they love doing. Yeah, they can have nice things they want as well, but it's not all about the Benjamin. It's not all about just the money, right? So how do you suggest we blend that for, particularly for kids as they're coming up? When they get a little older, you know, there's a different component to that. But when they're younger, or if you're coaching them, how do you suggest we kind of do that? I know communication is part of it, but you got anything you can give me on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing we're missing as a society literally is awareness and observation. Everybody's so busy that nobody's really stopping to notice what's really important, which is the humanness of each one of us, right? And
Right.
we all really have this unique and individual path, and it starts very young. And so I think coaches have this really great opportunity, as do parents, to figure out like maybe your kid is artistic, maybe your kid is musical,
Right.
maybe your kid is very expressive with their voice. So in terms of you have to nurture what they love. And we've become really good at, as soon as the kid turns 5, the parents are ready to, shove them in the box, and now they're going to go to this educational institution until they're 18.
Yeah.
you know, I won't go off on a tangent there, but there's a lot of it that's very programmed, and it basically like programs out all those things that you see when they're little, that imagination and that creativity. So I always, recommend like like, again, talking to the kids about what it is that they want, and then helping them to be a leader and get on their own path instead of a follower. It's not about what everyone else is doing, and then also like what you should be doing. Like, we need to take should out of the vocabulary.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. I know that we had talked about this with a couple of different coaches in the past about, you know, statistically, about 8 out of 10 things a child hears every single day from the moment they get up until they go to bed is a direction or a correction. And especially now they're home all the time. But I mean, think about it. Get up, eat breakfast, brush your teeth, put your bowl in the sink, get dressed, get to the car, go to school, sit there, listen to that. After school, hurry up. We got to go to soccer practice, get your sister a piano lesson. We got to pick you up. We got to have dinner, get your homework, maybe sing a song, take a bath, and go to bed. When do they get to be a kid? When do we allow them to do what I got to do, which is, I played until the streetlights came on. You know what I mean? And that was when I really got to explore, like you're saying, and give that unstructured, free adventure. And sometimes it was throwing rocks at the creek, or sometimes it was playing kickball, and sometimes it was sitting there telling jokes. But we had the freedom to do that, right? So how do we invite that back into our kids' lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the whole busyness thing as a society, it's like this is why why social and emotional learning and intelligence has become such a thing, because people are literally not connected to their emotions at all. And so it is the number one thing that we teach is, what is a feeling? What is a thought? What is a belief? And what are the emotions elicited from that? How do you feel that in your body? Like, these are basic concepts that are never taught, but we're just so unaware and externally focused all the time. So I think to bring kids back, you have to model that as a parent. Like, if you're the frantic parent running around overachieving all the time, like I was, your kids are going to think that that's normal.
Got it.
So do they see you slow down? Do you take time as a family to slow down? Are you at least connecting like over a meal, or doing something on the weekend as a family?
Right.
Or at least writing it off like, sorry, I can't, we're too busy. I mean, it's always a choice. If you're overbooked and you're overbooking your kids, then it's a choice to take something off the schedule.
So that even adds even more to the expectations, because it's not just about the expectations of the kids, it's also the expectations put on ourselves. And then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where it's never ending, never ending. Interesting. Okay. So when we set goals, because it feels like a lot of times the experience that we're offering the kids and the goals we're giving them, they're not based on, sometimes they're not like, what are they based upon, right? Like is there a foundation, whether it's a social or economic or spiritual or religious or whatever these foundations are based on, right? But I agree with you. I think the overscheduling is a big piece of this. So getting back to that expectations, we all want our kids to do well. We want our kids to live and be happy. So how do you handle putting those goals and those expectations and those with the kids? I mean, give me some more information there, because I know we've talked about that before a little bit.
Yeah, I think you have to teach them. I mean, you literally just have to teach them about, because when you said that, I was thinking back to like all the years that I played soccer, and then coaching my son. It's like, I don't think I ever looked up like how to teach kids how to balance their lives. And I don't remember a coach or a teacher or anybody ever talking to me about balance.
Right.
And so I think if we actually talk to kids about, you have a social part of your life, there's a mental and emotional part of your life, there's a spiritual part of your life, there's a physical part of your life. And then you actually sit down, and depending on what age they are, you talk to them. If it's physical, it's like nutrition and exercise, and that's a very important part of your life. And then mental health, like, being able to talk about your feelings, being able to process through a tough time. We don't talk about this stuff. The only way I can say is like, we have to start educating, and the educating comes at home, on the field, off the field, in schools. I mean, I think this is why, again, like social and emotional learning and emotional intelligence, as adults know it better, has become such a thing.
When you talk about that, I start thinking about beliefs, right? And beliefs are kind of passed down, right? There's a systems which I'd love for you to share in a second, but it's interesting to me because I know for me, the one thing my mom gave me was unconditional love and freedom to like literally, and I don't necessarily recommend this for everybody, but she basically said to me, I don't remember how old it was, but she said, look, you have to get up and get yourself to school, and you have to maintain your effort. So here's the deal: you don't have a bedtime. But if you can't get yourself up in the morning and get yourself ready and get to school, then I have to put a bedtime. And I just remember, why 50 years later I remember that, but it stuck with you because, man, I had a lot of freedom and power within. And you know what? I was really smart because I realized, well, I don't want to lose that. So I got up and got myself ready and went to school, right? It was part of that. It seems like we've gotten away from allowing kids to self-govern or self-regulate and figure things out. I'll ask you a question. I remember a conversation. Were you one of the parents that if your child forgot their lunch, then we went and drove and picked up lunch and brought them lunch, right?
Yes. I was that parent. I'm not that parent anymore.
Right, right,
But that again, that comes with awareness. So to touch on what you said about beliefs, absolutely. Like beliefs and patterns through familial lines are so common. I mean, think about the story. Even my kids tell the story about the story that I told, which was okay, so first it's like the kids start to figure out what they, like and don't like as soon as they can pretty much walk, you're shoving them in activities
right.
and start school. And then you start on you got to get good grades because if you don't get good grades, you're not going to get into college. And if you don't get a college degree, you're not going to get a good job. And it's like the same exact story that we've been telling our kids generation after generation. And then the sports and the extracurricular activities was well, if you keep your kids busy, then they won't get into trouble.
Okay.
Right? That
Yeah,
one?
right. Yeah. No, I remember hearing that. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know so we start putting the kids into sports and maybe they don't even want to play sports. Maybe they want to do something more individual, that's like not a team sport but something more creative.
Right.
So I really think we got to back all the way up, and again, this is what I was saying at the beginning. Understand what sparks your kid's soul, what really makes when you see them, what element are they in when they're happiest,
Right.
and keep them there and more of that.
So what you're saying is we really got to pay attention to our kids, just not expect our kids to pay attention to us, right? We've got to be focused in there. And granted, we want to have goals and all the different factors, but ultimately, if we can be paying attention to them and find what their passion is, what their interest is, what they're driven toward or pulled towards or interested, then it would make total sense that yes, okay, now I can help guide through that. Or sometimes what I'm finding, which is interesting now, is the more that I back away from it, the more they come toward it. The more I'm trying to make it about me and putting my expectations on them, the more they just back away.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's like what I think is parents, coaches, anybody needs to look at is you have to fix yourself, because when you said like your kids are watching you. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, it goes without being said, you are modeling
Right.
24/7 for kids. And so that's again that awareness, like, is if I say something as a coach at the end of a game and I'm mad because we didn't win and they didn't play well, if I don't get a hold of my emotions and I just start spouting out at the kids without being aware,
Yeah.
and then that's going to damage them on some level. They're all going to the intake's going to be different. But if you flip it, it's like, how would you want someone to treat you? Like, it's like you just have to be aware, because words, there's power and energy behind the things that you say, the things that you think, and what you're putting out there towards anybody.
And not just what you say, but how you say it, right? Particularly with kids, because I feel like, if you don't communicate clearly, if you don't use words in a way, some people say the compliment sandwich, right? Where you give them a compliment and you make an adjustment, right? Criticism without compassion is nothing but cruelty. All these different factors that are there. But to me, which is a really good one on communication, which is, comes up with Coach Wooden said, which is that a great coach, parent, leader is someone who creates positive change without causing resentment.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's powerful, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think the biggest opportunities from growth come out of failure and conflict and challenges. But if we're not giving kids the tools to understand, number one, understand that as a truth,
Right.
and then be able to navigate it, then that's why we're seeing so many youth that are just stuck. They're just swimming in these buried emotions and traumas. And so they start to experiment with drinking, and then that feels good because it's releasing some of that hurt that they're holding in, and then that becomes some exacerbated problem down the road. So it's like these tools, the social and emotional knowledge, can really start early, and again, at home, at school, on the field.
Right. So you know how do we help then the kids deal with the pressure? First of all, it sounds like one is apply less of it ourselves, right? I mean, that's a that's an easy one, or adjust how we're going forward. And I love that, some of that. And if you're a coach or a parent, think about, you can still help guide your kids to improve, because that's a big part of what we want. But making it about their journey and how you can help them can really make a big difference with that. But the pressures from society right now, right? I mean, keeping up with the Joneses used to be that was the statement, right? Well, now where we're at, like, how do we deal with that in terms of the pressure that these kids have socially, and all the different factors? How do we help them to be prepared to deal with that pressure? Because it's there, it's real.
Yeah, I think so education again is huge, and I think we've got to have more peer-to-peer support groups.
Mm,
Putting these kids in situations with other kids and opening up the discussion so that they realize, like, wow, I'm not alone. They feel like that and they feel like that. And it's not always easy because, again, we're a society that doesn't like to talk about how we feel, but it's got to start somewhere. And that's why, like Noble One, we came in it as coaches because we understood, like, parents get coaching, hire the kids are playing sports with coaches, or you get a coach to help them, with batting or dance. Or so why wouldn't you hire someone to help mentor your kids? So
yeah.
I always tell parents, like, don't get discouraged that your kid isn't coming to you. You're the parent. You're
Right.
also the one that they don't want to disappoint, but at least encourage them to have one trusted adult mentor.
Mm,
Just like you would, let's say you started a job in a corporation, whatever, a new job, and you want to get better and you want to learn, you pick a mentor, like
right.
you notice somebody doing things and you want to emulate them and have that discussion. Hey, would you be my mentor?
Yeah. In the youth sports world, the coaches, they are that mentor, they are that role model. If you're lucky, you get an assistant coach and you kind of work within that tag team. But one thing that is big, that we spend a lot of time with, talk about being honorable, being authentic, being honest, being real, right? So just by the words, totally need it. But if we dig deeper, I think kids have a BS meter that's pretty strong, right? And if you're not legit with them, they can figure that out in a hurry, right?
Yep.
And so, but how do you, as a parent or a coach, if I mean, you don't want to tell them everything because that could damage them for life, right? So what how do you find your own filter? How do you find where that boundary is? Does it depend on each individual relationship, or how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that's different. I think there is value in being authentic and being vulnerable. So
Vulnerable. Okay.
it's vulnerability. I mean, the minute that I find this all the time, and I've kind of always been like this, but not a lot of people are as open. But the minute you share your story, you empower people to share theirs. They might not do it right away, but
Right.
you never know by, opening up a little bit about your story or something that's a relatable experience. Because especially with kids, instead of always like coming straight at them, like, how are you feeling?
Right,
Like you said, you're pretty intuitive at knowing what's going on with kids.
right.
So you kind of like share a story that is going to give them an aha moment where
Mhm.
maybe you messed up and you're vulnerable. And then it's like, it's that connects you,
Right.
you
And
know?
one thing that coaches, it's really important um, that you can just do little language, like instead of using close-ended questions, using open-ended, which creates dialogue. So instead of "Are you okay?" which is basically yes or no, right? We want to go more towards how what's going on, what can we do to make this better, those kind of conversation pieces that are going to get a few more words out of them and kind of build it up. I like that. When you were mentioning talking about peer to peer, I can remember some of the best learning and fun growing experience I had was just hanging with the kids down in the neighborhood, down just hanging out. And maybe some parents are freaked out because you learn a little more than you're supposed to know. At when you're 7, you're hanging out with 10-year-olds or 10-year-olds or 13-year-olds, whatever the case may be. But it seems to me that there's some really natural, organic opportunity to grow in those kind of scenarios, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think peer to peer is huge. And I think that, we do it like you think because you're getting together on the field and you're playing your sport, multiple times a week, that is teamwork. But what about taking it off the field and going and doing something where they can connect more on a personal level? So it's still team building, but they're getting to know each other outside of that actual activity. It just kind of expands it a little bit more.
Well, and even as a coach, if I know that practice time is precious, but if they get there 10 minutes early, let them socialize instead of just sucking the life out of everything and start to pound his expectations and hit him with this is what it's going to be. Let them socialize because they may be going to different schools and they don't see each other very often, right? And
Yeah.
one of the struggles I have is the fact that they use these things all the time so much that they really don't know how to talk to each other. So this gives them a great opportunity to be authentic and real and vulnerable and have conversation and check in and all the different factors. Plus, let's be honest, to me, the best teams I've ever been on, we actually liked each other. There was a bond, there was a relationship that kind of went across the board. So I think that's really important as well. Yeah.
Yeah, coaches have a big responsibility. It's not just about winning games. And
Right.
that's why I love having these discussions with you because it's like it really is just bringing awareness to what a huge responsibility and what an impact we can have on so many kids.
Absolutely. Well, and that's the beauty to me of youth sports because it is exponential in terms of exponential to how it can continue to go. Let me, I got a couple questions. Let me show these by that have come in and see if you're good with this. By the way, if you're ever watching and you want to throw in a question, feel free to do so. And one of our staff will get back to you. If you want a private email, that's one thing. But if not, we can also follow up or give us a good idea because some of the conversations that we have on the Talk Teach Play channel are based on what people are discussing. So here's one from a dad, Seth, from Los Gatos, California, down by San Jose. He says, I want my kids to reach their true potential. Let me start again because I'm horrible at this, right? I want my kids to reach their true potential. How do I correct them when their coaches are just letting them play and not really teaching them anything?
Hmm.
So, right. So it sounds like he's playing in a league that his expectations for what they're supposed to be learning is not the same from that. So, you got any thoughts about that? I have a couple that as well, but maybe you got a thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I remember that too, where it's like you get you start a season and you almost immediately know you're like, oh God, I know exactly this coach. Like it's like you just know. But so what do? You're gonna teach your kid like, oh, let's just pull you out and get you on another team,
No.
or are we gonna teach them like, no, let's stick it out, let's
Right.
make the best of it, let's learn what we can, and then again communicate with your kid. Like, do you feel like you're learning? Do you feel like you're expanding? Are you getting out of it what you want to? What do
Right.
you what would you do? And ask permission to give them your opinion. So many times we literally just start projecting what we think onto other people,
Mm,
right? You
yeah.
know,
Yeah.
instead
That's a good
of,
point.
you mind if I share some thoughts about ask permission. Maybe, maybe kids don't want to hear what you have to say at that moment. Or, hey, can we talk about some things that I observed at practice later?
Well, and if they don't want to talk about it then, sometimes, sometimes that's cool because there's the emotional of it. And then later let them come back to you and then they're going, what do you think? Because they will want that. That's true.
But
If don't forget though, that we can't allow, Seth, what I would say, if you're watching this, please don't be the guy that undermines the coach that's volunteering their time to do it, because that actually breaks it down. Two things. One, I would recommend you adjust your own expectations. If it's a rec league soccer, it's going to be rec league soccer. You're probably not going to get a professional coach who's going to drive your kid to do whatever. However, if your kid's having a total blast, maybe that's the most important part right now. So you have to kind of look at that. The second part, a little bit to your point, I think, is to have the conversation and make sure that you're not undermining in any way. Because I've seen this scenario happen. We're driving home and it's after the game and my son's in the back and my wife's over here and we're driving along and I go, honey, it's horrible. They're not letting Mason play first base and he's the best first baseman on the team. This is ridiculous, and we think we're pumping our son up, making him feel good about it. But what we're doing instead is we're undermining my son's belief in the coach. And now that experience is going to be changed and it's going to lower that even worse. We got to be careful of doing that.
100%. What I was actually thinking was, whose experience is it? Right?
Yeah, there you go.
It's the kid's experience. You're the parent. You're there to observe. Obviously, make sure that they're not going to get hurt,
right,
in any way, like mentally, physically. But you're just there to observe and guide. Your child is having the experience, so allow them to have it. And then, whenever it's, time to talk about something, don't just insert. And I agree 100%, like stop undermining, stop, because you're just setting a bad example. It's you're teaching judgment.
Right. Ooh, okay. That's a whole other piece of that.
Yeah.
Right, here's another one that came in. So this is a mom, Autumn. She's from Reno, Nevada. She says, I played college soccer. My daughter is really good. She's a really good soccer player, but she's passive. She doesn't seem to care as much as I do. Like she doesn't care if they win and lose. And I want to light a fire in her butt. What do I do? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to give this one to you.
Well,
what do you do?
That is exactly what we talked about. That's perfect, because it's like you as the parent wanting your child to do how you would do, to be how you would be. And it's like through your eyes, you're like, yeah, my kid is really good, so therefore they should want it.
Right.
But maybe don't. Accept that. Like, I'm not going to say that I think that there isn't anything you can do.
Right. Well, I think there is, in a sense. I know, because if she should call you and you guys should have a conversation, what you should do. No, right? Because you could, but I think the other thing, Autumn, what I would tell you is that as a mom, as a dad who's gone through similar but not the same, I would say first adjust my expectations. Let's be real. The other is that, like you said, it's got to be, is it their journey? Is it their, experience? And the other is that, maybe by me pushing, what I'm actually doing is I'm going to make it that my child will not want to do this anymore. Yeah. And I tell everybody that really the longevity of life of youth sports, which becomes adult sports, you want your child to want to love being active and love sports and all that for a lifetime, rather than trying to make them something that potentially possibly college scholarship and they get this and that, the pressure to be the best, instead of just allow them to be what they are. And who knows, maybe they'll love it. And maybe later on, I interviewed Michael Stone, who played in the NFL. He played 7 seasons in the NFL. He didn't pick up a football until he was 12 years old.
Yeah.
Think about this, right? So he did all these other things. And then at 12, by the way, he said for himself, he wasn't very good for his first year. It wasn't until basically his sophomore year in high school that he actually goes, hey, I'm pretty good at this. But he did it because of his friends. And maybe we've got to adjust our expectations and just kind of let it be their journey.
Yeah. I mean, think about that. Like what I said earlier was, the minute the kids are capable of, entering into activities, we sign them up.
Right.
let's say your kid starts playing soccer in U5, and then the whole time you're like, and it is so competitive and political, you easily get then sucked into the system of how good, and then you sign them up for, competitive, and then they've got to get on the red team or the blue team or the gold team, and then they're traveling, and then they've got to make the high school varsity, and that becomes a whole political battle, and then you wonder why they're in high school and they're just burnt out, because we actually forget, like, not only are they playing that sport, but they're trying to figure out their identity
Right.
and social interactions. There's so much pressure on kids. And so when it comes to things like sports and parents, it's like, is that really where you want to be applying pressure? Like,
So give me a couple tips. We got to wrap up just because I know on time, but give me a couple tips that you'd recommend for a parent or a coach, particularly in terms of right now, that maybe can help out for them. You got any couple tips that maybe, it sounds like we've given some good information, but sometimes it's good to kind of recap and kind of go into it a little bit.
yeah, let me, do you have that document?
Yeah, I do. I can go ahead and share that for you.
Yeah, just pull that up and then we can just kind of go through it.
You see that good?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I think key takeaways for parents, it's like you got to start listening to your kids. So asking those, questions, being curious, and then wait for the answer. Like, that's, stop projecting and dictating, ask questions and listen.
Okay.
I think that's huge. Cutting out the shoulds. Well, you should have done this and you should have done that. And it's like, no, we just need to cut that out. That's pretty self-explanatory. Stop shooting all of your kids, because again, that's just projecting what you think that they should be doing.
Right.
We talked about curious questioning, involving them in the decision making. This is such a great way to empower kids and get them to trust you and make them feel like they're a part of it. You're not just telling them what to do, you're asking their opinion. It builds trust, it lines of communication.
Inclusion, it's really including them. I love that. Yeah.
Yep. Privacy, I think this is a really, really big thing. I talked to so many parents, and I never did this, but now, and maybe it was like a little bit past the time, but like these apps where you're like tracking where your kids go and you're looking at their messages. If there's something that's like triggered you, that there's a problem, like they're being stalked or something, that's one thing. But this invasion of privacy completely erodes trust between parents and kids. Or like, let's say, let's talk about like an example on the field. So let's say like you start talking about the kid between the coach and the parent, but you're not talking to the kid.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of
more like passive aggressive almost, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's always like this, keep that inclusive energy for kids. And then empowering independence, like teach them how to reason, teach them critical thinking, teach them how to make their own decisions. That's what this is all about. There's so many people walking around because of all the parents that have told their kids what to do, not let them fall in a pile of crap, like rescuing all the time, that they don't know how to take care of their basic needs.
Right.
And then finally, just like encouraging that autonomy, uniqueness, independence, their own path. The quicker you can get your kid to be empowered to start making decisions and standing up for themselves and using their voice, it's just, it will set them on a whole different trajectory.
I know for me, just even the conversation about my mom giving me the I think I was 7 years old or whatever. It's like, okay, you make your own bedtime, you get up in that at such a young age, you grow up and you have that opportunity. It's such an important piece that's good. And there's so many little components of that going forward. Great.
Yeah,
so
I would say too, like any of these things, like if you try something and it doesn't work, you're setting the expectations, you're setting the boundaries, and you set off onto something and it doesn't work, then regroup.
Yeah.
Okay, you tried that, it didn't work. What do you suggest? Like, come up with an idea. There's always, everything's figure outable, right?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So on the bottom here, this is the best place to reach you guys, right, Kristen, at nobleones.org or connect@nobleones.org. Is that the best place? You guys can see that there.
Absolutely. go to our website and check out the different things we do for coaching and groups and organizations and speaking. And then also, yeah, you can just email us directly, connect@nobleones.org.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, and I always love our conversations. I think, when we talk about expectations, there's a whole more depth now that people in spiritual and all these other components are talking about detachment and other components. But I think we've got to get real with this and realize that the pressure we're putting on our kids, indirect or direct, is really causing problems. And I think if we can manage the expectations and communicate, I think good things will happen. So I appreciate your perspective on this, and your expertise is always spot on. I look forward to the next time we get a chance to chat. So we always like to remind everybody at Talk, Teach, Play to make sure that if you enjoyed what's going on here, obviously subscribe to the channel, maybe send in some messages and follow up, because it allows us to continue the dialogue for sure. If you want to reach out to me or the National Academy of Athletics, just go to our website, nationalacademyathletics.com, or you can email info@naofa.us. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, right? You guys are on there as well, social media. So catch up to us. We'd love to have it. And I guess the last thing is just with kids, particularly whether you're a coach or parent, whatever it is, always remind the kids out there to play hard and have fun. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks, Chris.